On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk CEDIA's new board and NSCA's training at Expo. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
This is ResiWeek, episode 371, Making Good on Promises. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matt D. Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my longtime friends. First, we have Mr. Henry Clifford. He's the president of Livewire and a co-founder of Paracel. How you doing, Henry?
Hey, Matt. Great to be with you.
Have you recovered from being in the Bahamas?
Yeah, it was rough, but re-entry. It's Monday, but I'm on here with you guys. It's a great.
What else could you ask for?
No, nothing.
Exactly. Then we have Mr. Richard Fregosa. He's the principal at Fregosa Design. How you doing, Uncle Richie?
Mellow West Coast Pineapple Express greetings coming in. So we've got that weird weather storm coming in. It's staying away from the flooding at this point, but away we go. It's not exactly mellow California right now.
You just have all the news right now in California.
We're in the headlines. Yes,
I'm getting all kinds of news drops from Cali. All right. Let's kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. Congratulations is in order. CEDIA has seated their new board members. The association has nominated and elected Eric Bodley, Jennifer Mallett, Stephen Goodhume, and James Radcliffe to essentially assume new board of director positions. Henry, obviously, first of all, congratulations to them. Henry, let me start with you on this. As a former board member like myself, what's on tap for them? What are you expecting to see out of this new blood that's coming on to the board?
Well, I echo your congrats. There's a high level of give a damn there with. I know Jennifer and Eric fairly well. I don't know the others, but I think what's in store is on the back end of the strategic planning process that we sort of started together in 2017. We're starting to see now CEDIA really starting to try and make good on some of these promises of workforce development, education, et cetera. So I feel like this is a really good time to be stepping up and serving. And I think the board will benefit tremendously from, Eric ran the board and has forgotten more than a lot of us know. And Jennifer obviously running a really cool concept. And these other folks who come on board, I think one of them represents UK, the other guy's from New Zealand. So that's exciting, especially to see people coming back and stepping up. So I feel like the membership's going to benefit tremendously. And to anybody out there who's sort of grumbles maybe about CEDIA, I'd say it's a good opportunity to volunteer if you have anything you want to see change, be the change.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Heck, you and I dealt with that a ton when we were on the board because there was a lot of changes that happened right before we got on, and there was always a lot of grumbling that when you hit back with that question of, well, what are you doing to get involved? It was crickets, lots of crickets. Rich, one of the things that I've always found fascinating with the channel is how big of a role the association can play for a lot of us, and how involved and how excited and how vocal we get over it. what does it mean when we see, again, a really wide slate of new people coming into the board and coming onto the board? And what is the association going to garner out of that?
We're seeing year 3 of CEDIA, the show, and CEDIA, the organization, no longer being together.
Mm-hmm.
For the longest time, and again, I was at CEDIA 2. I always tell everyone I was never at CEDIA 1. My old partner was at CEDIA 1, but I was at CEDIA 2 in San Francisco, 98. When we started out, we always talked about is like the reason why we all got in the industry was because we all weren't going to make money with our bands or our gigs or whatever we were doing. So we're like, let's go do this. This will be awesome, right? We all needed day jobs. And with the beginning of the association, we'd always talked that it was a core group of really dynamic characters who saw that we needed to come together and work together. And a lot of it grew around that show. That show was the focal point, right? Mm-hmm. It was the celebration, the meeting point, the parties, right? They were there, it was just as much a community building effort in the early days as it was a business effort. And early on with the manufacturers, because this was before the days of holding companies. This was before the days of 7 brands under, one international conglomerate. These were all small boutique firms, manufacturers included. We were, we were the custom electronic design and installation association, right? We even had a different name from what CEDIA became now in terms of the acronym. And I'd always said that once the adolescence hit of our industry, there were going to have to be some necessary changes. How you ran it as a founder, how you ran it kind of from rock and roll cowboy lifestyle wasn't necessarily going to work if you were going to be taken seriously in the industry and grow. There's been a lot that's been done over the past few years, but it's not as sexy, right? It's not the trade show. It's not the parties. It's not for the younger companies or for the younger people coming in. We're looking for something more than a 9 to 5. We're looking for some ways to expand their passions into making it an industry. But now you have established companies who are like, no, we have rules here. And there is a big part of how our industry tries to pattern itself after the greater commercial industry, but at the same time, education, but at the same time, doesn't want to lose that rock and roll vibe from it. So you have these two clashing cultures at this point. I'm glad that Eric's back. I've known Eric, close to 30 years, right? He remembers where we started. But again, like I always talk about the stuff like how many CEDIA members know about the lobbying campaigns? How many CEDIA members know about all of the work in trade law? Stuff that affects them truly on a day-to-day. But where we get upset is, well, the show's not as big, or I can't get part to, I get all of those things, but it creates a crossroads for the association, right? You're seeing the growth of buying groups and everything else is that you have a choice. You can stay small. You can maybe make a living now, but the way that we made a living 30 years ago is not the way that you can sustain a living now. The world has changed. The cultures has changed. I've said it often on our other show, right? Software's eating your world. So if you are a gearhead, you don't want to be the very last of the guys who's working on, coal-driven engines. You don't want to be the guy selling coal on these engines. So, a big part of CEDIA is this transformation. You're 3 decades in now, going on the 4th decade. You have to change. And that does require a little bit of not only accepting that you need grown-ups in the room, but that you have to be one of the grown-ups in the room. And that's a little tough to accept because we have this youth vibe about what we do because it's still fun, right? Mm-hmm. It's still movies. It's still music. It's still Flash. It's still all this awesome stuff that keeps me happy and loving still what I do. But your approach has to at some point evolve. And the only way that it's going to evolve is if you learn to start taking your personality out of it. And again, we have the business exchange. We've got, I've had this talk so many times over the past 30 years, and I've worked with CEDIA in the past. I've done a lot of background stuff. I've never been on the front end side. I've always just enjoyed being quiet support on the back, and supporting the message and reaching out to integrators, because we always started CEDIA with the reach one, teach one, right? It was about passing tribal knowledge. now it's less about how to hook up a speaker, and it's more about how to make sure that your P&Ls are going to be right so that you can get through whatever the next economic situation is going to be. And, we don't want to see anymore. We've seen so many companies come and grow and the ranks swell, and you can't throw a nickel and hear some guy, oh, I'm making money and I'm going nuts. And then 36 months later, 30% of them are gone. We're trying to avoid that at this point, is that we want, if you want to get into this industry, to give you the tools to actually thrive in this industry, not to go ahead and just flash in the pan, make a couple of bucks, make your big job, right? And then, oh, wait, I didn't account for the fact that my profitability on the job is not when I sold it. It is that 60-month period after the project and after support and after everything else where I've determined my profitability on my project. That's my true money. What's left 5 years after? Not 5 days after, 5 years after. And so, again, I'm hopeful. Because, dude, I root for CEDIA. I truly do. They're a brotherhood. It's given me the ability to do things in my life that I couldn't do otherwise. And so, it's not only about, like I said, asking more adults to be in the room, but deciding, do you want to be one of the adults in the room? And that's what joining's about, really. It's not about showing up for a party or getting, the press or everything. It's like coming in and doing the grunt work. What are you going to do for yourself, for your industry? So there's Uncle Richie's Fireside Chat. Thank you for joining, Matt. Henry, if you have it.
Awesome. All right. And, I'm glad you brought up the being the adult and learning something, contributing, because it leads right into our next article coming to us from CE Pro. Commercial Integrator Expo welcomes NSCA as an educational partner. Now, if you've forgotten, Commercial Integrator Expo, whose parent company is Emerald Expeditions, that now owns CEDIA Expo, follow along, you'll do fine. They are co-locating a commercial show with CEDIA Expo this year in Denver, again during Expo, where you're going to see some commercial exhibitors in the Resi space who typically wouldn't show up to Expo. In addition to that, obviously, they've partnered with NSCA, who is a huge partner for education, etc., in the commercial world. So, Richie, this is the first year that Commercial Integrator is going to have their little expo, in addition to CEDIA Expo at the Expo. We're saying a lot of expos here, but it's a really big deal that they've brought in NSCA, even though I'd argue that a lot of residential integrators who only moonlight, shall we say, in commercial may not understand how big of a deal this is. So, Richie, can you break down how big of a deal it is for NSCA to be involved and to be offering the amount of training that they're going to offer for residential integrators who are working in commercial spaces?
Process. It's process, you can't do 50 classrooms without process. You can't do 300 huddle spaces without process. I'm one of the few, kind of utility vehicles that I do. There are years where I'm 50-50, commercial and enterprise and resi and bespoke. Bespoke is my love, right? Absolutely. I love the 5-year build out of a home, but it's a different animal. It's a different philosophy. It's a different psychology. It is just the hours, the expectations, of the players, knowing who the shot callers are in residential are different than they are in commercial. I think that residential, given the state of consumer electronics, should always be a part of your business model. But I think if you aren't focusing on what you do super, super well in residential, you need commercial to do what I always call kind of the paying the light bills job, right? That's the electrical bill. That's your any of your insurance costs, those little things that keep you going, that consistency on a project. But the only way that you get there, and the only way you get to be with the big kids in the room, is you have to have process. And I go back to it. A lot of integrators are smaller companies. They're founder run. So the founder has got 7 different hats. You know, and Henry knows this. I mean, he's been, you know, it's been your market that you've been marketing to on the other side. And you know, I know Henry's articles. I've read several of them. They're fantastic because it taps into exactly, you know, based on your background and organization and everything else. Is, you know, it's great to, you know, improvise, adapt, and overcome, but it's a whole lot better if you actually plan first. You know, it's a whole lot better if you plan first. And so by exposing the residential market to the commercial market, I think can only benefit the residential market. And I think in some respects, the commercial market can learn too, because you do get this influx of passion.
Yeah.
There's only so many, you know, elementary schools that you can do that ignite your passion. You know, I mean, we're having an issue right now. You know, my wife's in education and in training, and, you know, one of the issues that we're having across residential and commercial is the labor pool. You know, how are we going to attract new talent into this industry? Because you're seeing that in a lot of these industries, they're aging out. It's, you know, we always laugh, but it's the land of the 50 and 60-year-old white man still in a lot of these companies. And you're not seeing as much diversity, equity, and inclusion as we'd like. We're trying. But I think that by bringing those groups together, by exposing them with all of these expos, you know, it's worth a shot. I mean, again, I was in Barcelona, and you know, we were at the largest residential and commercial show put together. And so we were at ISE. It can happen. You can see companies who are doing it. You can see that they can filter together. So, you know, my feeling has always been, I always recommend that residential people learn the process of commercial, because it will only make your resi better.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Henry, I'm going to soapbox for a second, which hopefully will set you up for something good. I'm one of those companies that Richie alluded to, who does a lot of commercial, and we come from commercial. We come from House of Worship, and I see on Facebook and Instagram and some of the other social sites, other people in the residential space who are posting photos of jobs they've done in the commercial space where, to be incredibly polite, it's just wrong. It's done incorrectly. And some of these people are my friends, and I reach out to them and say, hey, let me help you out a little bit. I don't know how long you've been playing in that space, but let me help you out a little bit, making better decisions and leading your clients to better outcomes. Because again, looks like you did a great job. It looks clean. It looks neat, but that's not the right approach. That's a residential approach to a commercial problem. What is your take on, because my concern when I saw this article was that we already know there's not as much uptake of CEDIA training as we'd like, right? Again, you and I were both on the board. We dealt with those issues. My concern is that NSCA is going to show up to this, and they're not going to necessarily get the bodies through the door signing up for training that they would hope. And as an industry where we see a lot of people moonlighting into commercial and honestly trying to steer their business into commercial, they're not taking the trainings. They're not doing the work, as Richie pointed out, to learn the process to do that properly. Am I wrong on that? I hope I am.
I sort of feel like at this point, you've got this phenomenon that our industry's always been facing since inception, which one of my mentors described as climbing to a higher rock, right? We're always sort of running ahead of disintermediation. And so I think the loss of the middle market in the last 10 years has probably produced a number of different behaviors for integrators, whether it's been leaning into production, scaling really big, production homes, whether it's been going into commercial, whether it's been specializing in high-end residential, whether it's been trying to do both. And at the same time, I think I've seen a lot of crossover in terms of this resimercial sort of movement where you get, kind of, especially, COVID really kind of drove home this idea of ubiquity from the home into the car and then into work and then sort of back home again. And I think too, it's great because, like Mandy Beckner, who's now CEDIA's director of education, came from Avixa. Mm-hmm. And you look at the Avixa side, or you look at shows like Infocom, or you look at NSCA, groups like that. They're all sort of after the same thing, which is something Rich said earlier, which is just process, right? It's this idea of, hey, there's not 28 ways to do the same thing well. There's like one or two ways. In fact, no, there's one way, and here it is, and here's a cert, here's a little ticket. And so a lot of my friends who run integration businesses, I think, are starting to take the commercial side a lot more seriously. And to some extent, it's a lot easier if we can take off our integrator mindset. And by that, I mean the classic integrator walks into a Subway and asks if they serve sushi, right? And so the commercial world, though, has a path, much like the electrical side does, of certifications and levels, et cetera. So, I see the adoption of training the same way I saw it when I stepped onto the board, which is it's going to be taken to the degree to which it's made easy to take. And so you look at CEDIA's attempts at creating in-person training opportunities. My partner Dante and I, we have a training business where we actually own a CEDIA authorized education center, in Richmond, and train tons of students every single month, in person and online. And to the extent that there's more opportunities like that through distribution businesses, through outreach programs with schools, through incenting that with through integrator businesses, especially the successful efforts, I feel like, are the ones where the entity, whether it's NSCA, or whether it's CEDIA, or whether it's Avixa, they reach through the integrator owner to that frontline technician with messaging that's meaningful, and give them easy opportunities to take entry level training and say to them, hey, look, here's kind of your path. Day 1, day 365. Here's kind of a Candyland roadmap, chutes and ladders to sort of get you through there. And that's what we've been missing, is a really strong, definitive direction. And we're only just getting to the point now where CEDIA has rolled out some of their tools, and just even more recently, education outreach tools, toolkit. But even today, if you go into a school and you say, hey, have you heard of CEDIA? Have you heard of the electronic systems technician or the CIT cert? The awareness is still not there. So it's still very much grassroots, and it's up to us to push that forward. But there's never been more opportunities available than there have been today. But I agree, Matt, that you're gonna still see, because of the lack of standardization, folks who are gonna kind of not do the training, not take the time out, and because they perceive they don't have time. And as one of my mentors said, we never have time to do it properly the first time, but somehow we always have time to fix it.
Well, that's the same thing that we say to our clients all the time, right? Is, well, you should have called us the first time, because we would have done this right the first time, rather than you pay for it twice. We'll wrap in 1 second. Let me just kind of throw this question to both of you, either of you. Is there more that CEDIA should be doing or could be doing to promote this aspect of the show, the commercial side? Or is that completely fall on Emerald as the parent company of Commercial Integrator, and obviously the the owner of CEDIA Expo. Does that fall on them and their partnership with NSCA?
I think they're taking a swing at it. I mean, I think we'll know after what the reception's going to be like. I'm not. I jumping on this one, Henry.
That's where I'm at as well. Is the like, oh man, I hope so.
I'm with you guys too. Meaning like the messaging. I feel like if they just maybe added an aisle or a section like Innovators Alley or whatever, and started weaving it in. If they make the messaging too much like it's two shows co-located,
yeah,
I think at some point people go, well, wait a minute, what about Infocom and what about, it's surely is what's Emerald trying to do there? Is Emerald trying positioning themselves squarely and saying, well, this is another Infocom, or this is a crossover attempt at pulling people. The mission clarity is probably something that I don't really fully understand, and so maybe that's something I need to better. But I will say, CEDIA show, the CEDIA Expo, has a strong brand recognition. So anything that sort of takes away from the simplicity of its expo, I think doesn't really do any favors. Versus it's probably much easier to iterate on the because really what's the goal is to get people on an airplane into the thing, into the building. Once they're there, can kind of do whatever the heck they want. But as far as are they going to grab net new people on the strength of just having a small inaugural commercial show, I don't know. It doesn't speak to me necessarily.
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Richie, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Fregosa Design, where can they do that?
You can find me obviously on the interwebs. You can put Fregosa Design in or my name. Obviously the socials at our Fregosa on the socials out there. But as I always say, I hope the place that you can find me would be here on AVNation.tv in our suite of shows. Obviously, I love being here on ResiWeek. Steve Greenblatt and I are moving on to, we've shot past episode 100 and moving even on further with the State of Control, where we talk about the state of the custom electronics programming side of things. But yeah, obviously, hopefully you can find me here. And more importantly, if you can support our sponsors, that makes me even happier. Company, FregosaDesign.com.
There's a company man if I've ever seen one. Henry, my friend, if people want to connect with you, learn more about Livewire or Paracel, where can they do that?
Absolutely. At Get Livewire, the tag, and at Get Parasol. And the rest of the time I'll be out in the garage sanding fiberglass. So working on a little toy boat or playing with remote control airplanes.
I like it. All right, gentlemen, thanks again for joining us. Thank you for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott and most other social platforms. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.